Hi, welcome to episode number 5. Last week I talked about my 6 takeaways with the Panasonic G7, and this week I want to talk about switching from or moving up to the Panasonic G9. Why I did, what's the differences, what improvements did I find, etc. So I'll start with saying I was happy with the G7, but I wasn't happy with the G7. It was kind of a both, you know. I was excited about it, and I still very much appreciate having that camera to learn. All of that manual settings, I used it and I learned it. But there was still felt like something was missing. I still wasn't capturing the quality of images that I wanted to. Now, at the time that I bought the G7 or the G9, I was still an avid amateur photographer, I guess you could say, because I wasn't professional. I wasn't doing it as an income. But I still wanted to do it for family and friends and a photo booth at the church, and I just really had a deep desire to be able to capture my own images for my family, just different things like that, for different reasons, I guess. So I went and I did a lot of reviews, searched out a lot of reviews on camera, DP review, YouTube reviews, just read articles. Different things, you know, you have there's a camera comparison tool online, and you could put in one camera and another camera, and I compared different ones. Believe me, I spent a long time comparing a lot of the cameras, and the G9 had excellent reviews, and I just thought, okay, for my price range, because I wasn't ready to spend a couple $1,000 or $3,000 on a camera at that time, so the price range I was looking at was about $1,200. And so I was considering the Sony a6500 as a camera and the Panasonic G9 in that range. I knew that I could use the same lenses, and their lenses of Panasonic are relatively inexpensive, I think, compared to other lenses, depending on what you're getting. But I just felt like I could keep my lenses, and I loved the color rendering on the Panasonic. I love the menu system. I love the feel and the hold up. So there was things that I loved that I wanted to stay with. You know, I think that's like you get a certain car brand and you like it, so the next time you get it again. So that's kind of what I did. And I noticed that in the reviews, there were a lot of the reviewers were sports life and wildlife photographers. I did find one person that was doing it as a portrait studio, and his portraits were beautiful. It was working for him. And so I decided that was what I was going to get. And I can't say I regret it at all, because I do love it as a camera still. And it is and today in the studio, this is my backup camera. So there are 4 things that I think that I see as being improvements that made a difference for me. The first and the most predominant thing was the in-body stabilization. So the Panasonic G7, you could buy lenses that had stabilization, and believe me, I did. But the camera itself didn't have in-body stabilization. And I would say that when I bought the G7, I didn't even know what that was. But after a while, I could realize that sometimes I had some camera shake, or I had some movement if my shutter speed wasn't particularly high. So I knew that that made a difference. So sometimes I was nailing it and sometimes I wasn't. So when I switched to the G9, that stabilization, they call it 5-axis image stabilization, meaning it's in 5 different axes. And so it really is good stabilization. It really, truly is, and it made a huge difference. My picture quality all of a sudden improved 100%, I would say. It just, you're nailing it. You're taking the picture and you're getting it. You're not, the camera shake was no longer an issue with me. So that was I mean, for that reason alone, it was worth the upgrade to me. And price-wise, like when I bought this a few years ago, I think I paid $1,200 for just the body because I had the lenses. And when I had bought the G7, it was $500 or $600, and those are still about the same price. I think I just saw this week that the G9 was on sale for $1,000 with just the body. So it's holding its value about the same, even you know, this many years later. I don't know the exact date of when it came out, but about 4 years later, it's still holding its value. So the next thing would probably be the dual card slide. So in the G7 can only have one memory card at a time, and the G9 has dual card slot. And they have the capabilities of saying, I want to record video or pictures, still pictures, either one simultaneously, or one and then the other, or one for video and one for still pictures. So it's really good customization, but to me, if you really are doing work that you don't want to lose, and especially if it's like a wedding day or some kind of special event and you're taking pictures, you want to make sure that if that one card fails, the other one picks it up. So that's, to me, that's essential for anybody doing serious photography, and that was a major difference that I found with it. The second would be the frames, or the third one I mean, would be the frames per second. The G9 does 20 frames per second, whereas the G7 only did 7 frames per second. I think it means it's faster focus, and I noticed that it was a faster focus. But as for, and when I did do the shooting off the continuous frames per second, it was accurate, and it did capture what I was trying to get. And which is kind of fun when you got somebody running or doing something and you got that movement, that inch by inch movement. So it's really fun to use that, especially like sports or anything like that. So it was better in that way from the G7. Now I will say that in the studio, it doesn't make much difference for me because the strobe lighting that I used, it can't keep up with it. So unless I get some LED lights in here or have that constant lighting that's a little bit stronger, I've got one constant light on me today. So I could do some pictures with it, but usually, I'm using the strobe lighting, and it can't keep up with it. So like you'll take a picture and the first one's great, and then you got 5 or 6 other ones that are poorly lit that look terrible, and then you got another great one, and then, so I just really don't use the continuous shooting when I'm using strobe lighting in the studio. But anything else it would work great for. And then the last thing I think was the megapixels. I moved up from 16 megapixels to 20 megapixels. And like when you're posting on social media, and like I share everything on Facebook or Instagram, you can't hardly tell that difference. It's not quite that much, but it is still a bump up in camera quality and then the megapixels. So we know that megapixels really matter when you're enlarging an image, because when you have the lower megapixels, you're just stretching out. It looks grainy, it looks blurry. But you still wouldn't, I think if you're going to do anything professional, you wouldn't want to go less than 20 megapixels. So that would be the bare minimum. But overall, I would say that this is just a better camera. It's weather sealed. So if you're going out in the rain, it's got good weather sealing on it, but it feels like a professional camera. It feels like, okay, I moved from an entry-level camera to a professional camera, because I think I said that, the G9 is considered a pro camera. So it feels like it. It's heavier, so there's something in it that's better made. They've used better materials, more solid materials, and it's advertised to be the most ergonomically correct, and to me it is. It feels great in the hand. It still has a great touch screen. We have, on both of them, we have the articulating screen, which means that I can have it on the back, I can flip it around, and then I can flip my camera around, and I can look at myself and see if I'm in the frame. So like if you're doing vlogging or things like that, it's really important if you're doing any kind of self work with especially vlogging and things like that. Panasonic put out an update and really improved the video capabilities, comparing it to the Panasonic SH5, I think it is. That one of the Panasonics that most people use for videos that I never used, but it is supposed to be comparable to those. So we did use this camera beside we had a Sony broadcast camera that we had for a while. It was broadcast quality and could go live, and it was just a very expensive camera. And we paired it up with this G9, and the pictures, the video quality was just as good. You know, there's 100 million different settings on that broadcast camera that you could change, but what I'm saying is I felt like it competed. Now I will say that it has a completely different camera color profile, because when we did that editing, it was like, oh, you could tell it's a different angle because it was a different color. But I just felt like it was good that way. The only loss from the G7 to the G9 would probably be the built-in flash, which was very convenient, especially if you're not taking pictures of people. It was very nice to have because you didn't have to have anything else, and you just push a button and it flips up. But I very rarely used it, because if I was taking pictures of people, it was harsh lighting because it didn't have any kind of modifier on it. So I really still didn't use it that much. So to me, it wasn't a loss. And in every way, I feel like I gained going up to the G9. And like I said, it's still my backup camera, and I wouldn't hesitate to use it in the studio if anything happened to my other camera that I have now. And I'll talk about that in the future episodes. But yeah, I think it's a great camera, and I think especially if you're doing outdoor stuff, it's really great. If you're taking a picture of your kids at the football field, I think it's really great. It's going to get good frames per second, and especially if you're going out there during the day and it's got really good light conditions. But for me, I still had the same, like I produced better quality. I had better memory. I had better megapixels. You know, there were so many improvements, and at the same time there was still something lacking, because it was micro four thirds, I would say. And that would be the only thing I would say. And since then, you know, since I bought this, Panasonic is putting out full frame cameras, because I think, now they're expensive. You're going to pay $4,000 for all of it, but $3,000 or $4,000. But they're good quality and they work very well. But for me, still trying to take pictures in the church sanctuary, like of my son-in-law playing guitar with the, you know, the poor lighting and the funny color lights that the sanctuary had. I still was getting grain, even though I could bump up the ISO a little bit further. I would say I didn't want to go up much more than 800 ISO on here, though. Like other cameras, newer cameras, you can go up to like 12,000, and I might have went up to 1200, but I just didn't feel comfortable after that because you would get grain. And sometimes adding grain is worth it to get the shot. But there was still, it was still a micro four thirds camera. And so that's why I didn't stop with the G9. And next episode, I'll talk about my next camera, my third camera, my professional camera for my business. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you got any questions, hit me up. If you will, please hit like and subscribe so you'll get the next episode. And I'll see you next time. Bye.